It's gonna get really spicy, and we love to see it here at Stripping and Dipping.
Is Danny Rick actually going to get you there on time?
Ooh, good question. Good question, Black.
Australia listenership has now gone through the floor.
And we don't even know what he did besides the pictures that he showed, right? Yeah, Charles around Suzuka would be my ideal lap if Lewis isn't there.
So long as they're not on plan B for barrier, you should be all right.
There's nothing Formula One can offer Lewis right now. And so for him to sit down and say, yeah, right, I feel comfortable enough to tell this story and I want people to understand what it was like to be in my shoes this whole time, then I was just super proud of him, honestly. Just couldn't wait to like give him a hug or something. Bahrain is amazing. Her mind, the way she thinks about things and the way she expresses them as well is absolutely stunning. So I think she would be the mentor for the team.
Welcome to Stripping the Dipping, episode 9 of our summer series Shutdown. And listen, I need everybody to put their hands where we can see them and get down to the ground because this is a DPD takeover with your boy Amg Denz, the brilliant Mr. Blag, and what can I say, our home girl, Deni, FIA Girly, absolute bad boy episode this is going to be. I'm so excited. So I'll start off with you, Deni. Firstly of all, how have you been over the summer break? How have you survived without like F1 on our screens for so long?
Hi, thanks for having me again. Summer break was amazing. I think I survived because I got to go home. So I was telling Georgina that it was like right on cue with like the last few races. I flew home, and so it was just recharging, being with my family. I hadn't seen them in a long time. So because like the UK can get a bit tiring sometimes, so sometimes you just need to like step back. So it was fun. I went to like this resort to the beach. We were like away from like civilization and cities and stuff like that. And so I really enjoyed it. I was coding, so I think that saved me from the boredom. So I was just looking at different strategies and coding those and learning new things to do with the Fast F1 package. But overall, it was really fun. So I went back to action. We'll see how it goes in the next half.
Blag, you see the productivity. You see what I mean about Deni? Like she's always on another level. It's so impressive. But I'm just saddened we didn't get an invite, to this holiday resort because we could have used it as well.
Next time, yeah.
We could have used it as well. Blag, what's up? Whilst I got here as well, man. How's it going? What have you been up to over the last couple of days?
I'm good. I feel like on my holiday I did zero coding. I didn't fly anywhere too exotic. I was in Mallorca, and then now I've been back to work. So hopefully we can learn a bit over the next hour or so from Deni how to be more productive, how to be so incredible. I'm well. I'm really into homework, and from every episode I'm on, I always talk about the homework. I listened to episode 28 of Stripping the Dipping, which is when Deni, you were on last time, and you were slandering a few. I'm looking forward over the interview to hear whether you still have the same opinion or whether you might have changed your mind. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, well, it's gonna get really spicy, and we love to see it here at Stripping and Dipping. But firstly of all, let's just get into it. So on this episode as well, just to kind of set out for the listeners too, we're gonna ask Deni a couple of questions, and kind of like touch on a lot of the hot topics that have happened throughout the summer break. But also, I felt it'd be really nice just to get to know more about the girl behind FIA Girly, and try and get like Deni's like rationale on some questions as well. We're gonna put forward to her. So it's gonna be a really fun episode, very interactive, and we encourage you guys as well, to put your responses in there as well. But probably the most recent thing to start off with, Deni, is we had Lewis opening up, a lot in the new kind of release that was made with the Vanity Fair magazine. And
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on it because for me, it was really eye-opening in a sense and almost very heartwarming / heartbreaking when, Lewis finally come out now and like openly kind of expressed his feelings on the day of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix last season. Some of the trials and tribulations and adversity he's faced as like, a black man or a black person just generally growing up, some of the racial abuse and experiences he had even as a kid. and
Yeah.
kind of this is things for the future. So my kind of question to you is, what were your thoughts on that initially, and what have you made of the things that have come out in light of this kind of public release?
I think that was very important. That was a very important interview on so many layers. First was Lewis first finding a source that is going to portray his story however he wanted to, and tell his story how he tells them. Because if we look at previous news outlets, magazines, things like related to the sport, they don't really tell Lewis's stories or Lewis's side of things the way they're meant to be told, and with the respect and dignity that a black person deserves. I think it's very different to be interviewing Max Verstappen and then Lewis Hamilton, because with black people, there's so many things you need to actually be careful with, and there's a lot of things you need to take into consideration where you put in a picture or an image or a video and the context you put in things. So I think it was so important. The first layer was Lewis finding a safe space where he saw and he said, yeah, right, I will tell my story to this source, and I trust that the rights or the editor, whatever, will put it out in a way that I'm well seen and heard. But then also him feeling comfortable in his shoes and the situation that he's in, and accepting Abu Dhabi, and accepting the type of person that he's grown out to be and where he is. Because he didn't just speak about the sport, right? He spoke about so many things. He spoke about how he grew up and so many things that we hadn't heard before, like him being physically abused on the street, and the exoneration process of after being incriminated by his principal at Headmaster and all of those things. So I think it was so important to hear that side of Lewis that we don't really get, because he's so alienated by the media that we so well look up to, which is the F1 journalists and all of these people around the sport. And so for him to sit down and say, yeah, right, I feel comfortable enough to tell this story, and I want people to understand what it was like to be in my shoes this whole time, then I was just super proud of him, honestly. Just couldn't wait to like give him a hug or something.
Aw. And honestly, Denny, I share exactly the same thoughts as you as well, man, on that one. Because again, like, I feel for Lewis has always been a feeling that, like, with him and just the specifically as well the motorsport media world, he's always had to kind of like move a certain way because
Yeah.
you can't trust them, and there have been times where he said stuff, and the media in his very early career when he was with McLaren would take it and try and use it to weaponize him, and like you mentioned as well, like a lot of the drivers, not all, but the majority, they kind of come from sheltered backgrounds, or they're kind of fortunate enough to have, like, parents that could shelter them for much kind of extended periods of their lives, whereas like you mentioned there with Lewis, this a lot of the experiences he went through are quite bespoke and kind of unique to a person of color, especially if you're talking about some of the more traumatic stuff as well, like him being a street and going to the corner store and being mobbed by two racist guys, which is terrible, or
Yeah.
even just when he's at the go-karting circuit, and like the other parents would say, oh well, don't share your gloves with Lewis because you'll steal them.
Yeah.
These things are so traumatic, especially for like a kid, to experience such like surface blatant racism from such an early age, and then to grow up with that. And even at McLaren as well, I felt that at times he was muted. Maybe the way Ron Dennis was running the team at the time, they didn't want too many kind of like headlights or too much negative press. So it's always felt that like his voice has been kind of muted, or almost like everything he said has been taken out of like context in a way to kind of put him down and to weaponize him. But like you said, I think Vanity Fair was like the perfect kind of media platform for him to get those sorts out, and to say a lot of the stuff that we actually think but don't often get the opportunity to say. And Black,
Mhm.
I'd like to invite you on this one as well, man. What was your take on Lewis's kind of comments in Vanity Fair magazine?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a few days to bring myself to read it because I knew that it would cover Abu Dhabi, and I didn't want to sort of hear. I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? You get invested in people. I didn't want to read that pain, but actually, then having read it, there's so much to identify with. The experience at school, the experience growing up. He's from Hertfordshire, which is in the home counties. So those of you that know England, that's a kind of quite a white area outside of London, very traditional. Some of it rural. He grew up in a sort of a new town, as I did. So I could relate to a hell of a lot of it. You know, can I ruin the mood? Because you guys are keeping it classy, and you know, Denny, you could be the classy one on this episode. I found it hilarious that Vanity Fair came out, and then Max Verstappen was in a magazine. Can you remind me of the title? I feel like it had a third word in it. Do you remember that?
Like kids something, like a sport week kids, something like that.
Sorry, you guys are being so classy and serious. Like for me, like that
What was it?
epitomized. Yeah, I mean, I don't. That's the thing. We don't even. He doesn't.
Right,
He lives in your head rent free. I don't remember. But all I know is that epitomizes that. Like what we're dealing with. You know, Lewis Hamilton in the September edition, which I'm told by people that understand fashion, etc. You know, the most important edition of a prestigious magazine. He'd kept his his silence on a lot of these matters for his entire life, and on Abu Dhabi for over 8 months. And as soon as he speaks, it's ratings. And then, if I'm being unclassy, his quote unquote rival is then in a kids magazine, and it was very enjoyable on Twitter watching people try to compare the two. So yeah, sorry for lowering the tone, but you know, I felt it had to be said.
No, Black, I think it was sensible, and it just goes to show you, you know, like the magnitudes of where Lewis is in his career, and then, you know, some of the other drivers on the grid, which, you know, have not been nearly half the adversity, half the kind of heartache, half the kind of discrimination, half the kind of adversity that he's had to kind of like work his way through, you know. And we will be on a lighter note on this podcast with the next question, kind of on the theme of Lewis's generally. But to kind of break it up as well, as we mentioned in the intro, we're going to be asking Denny some funny kind of questions as well. So to throw the first one in, Denny, like that's what I like to call like the interactive question. So you basically get to pick a driver for each kind of block. But bear in mind, if you pick that driver, Denny, you can't reuse them for any of the further questions in this episode. So you got to choose wisely. But the first one,
I can't use the same driver twice. Is that what you said?
Yeah, you can't use the same driver twice.
Okay, cool.
So bear that in mind. But the first question of our interactive questions is, let's say, you know, you have to, you know, go into town on a date, but you obviously have to jump in a taxi to get there. And basically, when you're in the restaurant having the date, there's also like somebody you want to avoid. So this is basically a game of taxi, date, and avoid. And you have to pick 3 drivers to basically go in each one of those things. So one driver that's going to be a taxi driver, one driver that you're going to be on a date, and the other driver, which you just quite frankly want to avoid at all costs. And like we said, if you pick that driver, you cannot reuse them again.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. I would either, I don't know. I think my myself wants to be Esteban Ocon to be the taxi driver just because he's like up there for me. But I think I would probably, because I want taxi rides to be fun. So maybe Daniel being the taxi driver, because I think he just say something stupid and make me laugh. And then I'd obviously go on the date with Lewis. I think that's the most obvious choice. Yeah. And I'd avoid Max at all costs. Just for this first one, I'd probably avoid him.
Yeah, honestly, Danny, I would have probably picked the same options too. I think Danny Rick is just like a taxi driver. It's just like it's just too funny. Like, and you know what he's like as well. He just says something.
You want to get there though, right? Is Danny Rick actually going to get you there on time?
Ooh, good question. Good question, Black.
Australia listenership has now gone through the floor. Apologies.
At least you get there safely because you know he wouldn't be speeding anything like that.
Oh, exactly.
Fair point. You know, and who wouldn't want to pick Lewis on like a date, or in my case, this is just a bro to this. The thing is, well, then if I ever met Lewis, I just think I'd be starstruck. Like, usually when it comes to guests, I try and come up with as many great questions as I can. But if it was Lewis, I just don't know. I'd probably ask him like the dumbest question. And you just do that like
same thing. My first impression that I remember like of meeting him was I was telling we were like in the meeting and we were waiting for him and I was I was telling them I was making an impression of Antonio Giovinazzi, mac and cheese, because he was so outraged that Kimi had picked mac and cheese, and I was doing that with like an Italian accent, and then he comes in and he's like, "Oh, all I had was someone telling a joke about mac and cheese," and I was like, "Oh, that was
What
let me
days?
to move on from there." Let me tell you, I was just like, "Oh, what do I say now?" So yeah, I completely get you, the starstruck thing.
Hey, well, I mean, at least you styled it out, though. To be honest, Jenny, if it was me,
At least
I
I
would have
made
probably
him
just
laugh.
exactly. You know, that's something you can always put on the CV, right? Like making Lewis Hamilton laugh.
Yeah, 100%.
That's amazing. Well, listen, I'm gonna let Blag ask the next question. So, Blag, you can take it away.
Yeah. So, you know, we talked a bit about the Vanity Fair article. And in fact, when Lewis had, you know, all that prestige, all that profile, he was nowhere to be. He was in Africa. And I think we only found out because he was leaving the first country he went to. Where did he go to? Rwanda,
One
was
of
it?
them was Rwanda. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he went to, yeah, we thought he was in Kenya, but he wasn't,
He
or
went to
something like that.
Namibia first.
Namibia, there we go. So, I mean, the next question is, and you talked about your summer break as well. You know, the importance that Lewis sort of has mentioned of exploring his roots. What did you take away from, you know, what he's said so far about his trip to Africa, and how important do you think it is for Black people, even if they're of Caribbean or American heritage, to go and visit Africa?
This is really interesting actually, because I had this exact conversation with a few friends earlier when he posted his Kenya pictures and caption. Is one thing people I think forget, maybe it's not, I'm not blaming people, but like we need to understand that Lewis was always exposed to, he just only recently, we can say, that started identifying as a Black man and started standing up for these things and living up to this, to his purpose, and starting to understand what Black people kind of face and how we have to fight these things, right? After the Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I think it was 2019, where he spoke about starting to 100% feel like he's a Black man, right? And we can't really blame him because he wasn't born into, like, coming from Stevenage, like you said, F1blag. That is a very white, Eurocentric, and he's from there, right? He is English. He is an Englishman, but then he never really looked like those people. And when he walks in, he goes to the school and he's on the street, people are telling him, go back to your country, but he is in his country. And so personally for me, obviously I can't speak for Lewis, but seeing him in this journey kind of fills my heart with like really, really like joy and happiness for him, because he's slowly starting to find himself. And even though he's from the Caribbean, or his ancestors are from there, his forefathers came from somewhere in Africa, and this is where we don't know where the link is, whether he found out by asking his dad or speaking to his grandfather where his forefathers are from, where his great grandfather is from. At some point there is a link somewhere to Africa. His roots are probably there, and for him to be there with his friends and be in such a wholesome moment where he's learning about the culture of the people and going to these beautiful places like the dunes, and being with the tribes and seeing wildlife, because it's stuff that he actually appreciates, and even in his Western life, if I can put it that way, is absolutely stunning to see. It's great to see, because there are people that are Black and they have African ancestors and they have African descendancy and roots, but don't claim it and choose to be part of that. I am English and I'm this, and don't stand up for the people that are asking for help and all these things. And to see Lewis, for me, it's just a really, really important moment. And I think a lot of Black people can sit down and reminisce on that not many of us get to claim our identity because we're born into white dominated countries, and he has two white moms, for instance, and all the culture that he knows and the food that he knows, everything is Western. And for him to come out of that and say, look guys, I want to go there and I want to meet as much, and we don't even know what he did besides the pictures that he showed, right? We don't know when he's planning to go back. Maybe he's on a whole journey of finding himself and finding where he actually maybe belongs, because he has never really fit on the other spectrum of his race, I guess. And so I just think it's really important for people to do that, and if you get the chance to do it, go for it. And he did, so that's great.
I'm intrigued about going to Africa. My dad's from Africa. I've never been. So, as someone up in his, 30s or something, you need to start planning. And so that was an inspiration. Denz, look, we don't ask you enough for your insights on this show. You're always asking the great questions. What do you think about Lewis's summer trip to Africa and the importance of people, particularly people of Caribbean heritage as well, to visit Africa, to understand the continent and the culture there?
Absolutely, Black. That's a really great question, and one I'm very happy to kind of explore as well, man. Because I mean, we're seeing it not just obviously with Lewis, but also with like a lot of footballers too. You've got the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi, young Chelsea player. You've got Alex Iwobi. I think growing up in England, sometimes like it feels as if it's really hard to identify with being, so what British or so what English at times as well. When you go to school and then you get your ass kicked by the teachers or by bullies, and then, you're racially going through all of these kind of conflicts. It's tough, like when somebody asks me, what is it to be British other than drinking tea? There's not really many other things you could really mention, So I think it's always good, when a sports person or anybody in that capacity, can kind of like look at the roots, kind of go back, to kind of where their ancestors are originally from as well, and that's the thing with Lewis. And I want a lot of people as well listening to this podcast to know that, like whilst the system sometimes feels like it can be against you, the one place that will always accept you and will never ever, turn its back on you, the one place that will always like love you unconditionally is home. And when I say home, I mean back home, back home in Africa, back home in the Caribbean as well. Like when you go there and stuff like that, you really start to understand like the value of life, the way of living, the way things are over there as well. And I think it gives you a whole new perspective and a whole kind of meaning on life as well, with a completely new renewed perspective. So I think for Lewis, it's great that he's doing that, because he's universally loved everywhere. You even see in Brazil, which is something we could probably talk about later on this episode too, just kind of, although he's not born there, because of his admiration for Ayrton Senna and because of just his way, just his aura, his energy, just the stuff he does for the people. Just there's loads of Brazilian people that kind of claim him as one of theirs, and I think it's the same thing with, having an African background, having a Caribbean background too. So, it's so kind of key, and I think at some point we will have to kind of go back and to retrace our roots and to kind of explore life much more than the kind of like hot melting pot that is London or England, or kind of where we reside for the most part, 9 to 5.
No, I couldn't agree more. And while I think there's a spirituality to the travel, and you'll see Lewis presumably come back and ready to go. If I was, this is me now with my F1blag cynical hat on. If I was either one of Rwanda or Namibia, I would expect to see a deluge of tourists following in Lewis's footsteps. And why shouldn't they? So let's see. And I'll segue and ask the next question. And before I hand the interview back to Denz, which is quite a fun one. Lewis is probably going to be solely responsible for the Kailami Grand Prix being back on the calendar. At the F1 or Liberty shareholders meeting not that long ago, Stefano Domenicali mentioned that in October he should be able to announce more about the calendar for next year, and hinted at new races. So we could see F1 returning to Africa for the first time since, I think it was 1993. But the question for Deni, when she's back on the line, is if you had to have a hot lap at any circuit with any driver, noting that you can't pick the drivers you avoided, got in the taxi with, or had a date with, where would you have the hot lap, and who would be driving it?
It's a good
And I
question.
think we can
there,
cut
Black.
that. Go on, yeah.
Well, we'll just style it out anyway until she's back,
Yeah.
because I'm sure she
Yeah.
won't take too long. But
Go on, Denz.
you know,
Tell me
like,
who you think.
man, like obviously Kyalami's an amazing circuit, and we have an amazing guest back as well, Deni.
Hey.
Hi.
Uh,
I don't know
so-
what happened there, but I could hear
It's
everything
okay.
you guys were talking about. So maybe you guys couldn't hear me.
Okay, that happens a lot. You're in the same kind of exclusive club as Mario Andretti, so that happened to him. So there we are. You're a world champion.
Claim to fame.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was just asking. So
The
we
track, yeah.
Exactly. We think that Lewis is probably going to be responsible for bringing Kyalami back on the circuit, on the race, the race calendar. So you tell us, you've got to pick a driver in a circuit for a hot lap, and you can't have Danny Rick, you can't have, who was it, Esteban Ocon? No, you didn't pick him. You picked Max Verstappen, and you picked Lewis Hamilton. So which driver and which circuit for a hot lap? Off you go.
I would go Charles Leclerc, Suzuka.
Deni, are you sure you want to make it alive?
How's your neck? How strong's your neck?
I would go Charles Suzuka. I think that is such a fun track, and it's so fast. And if there's one of the few drivers that absolutely go through corners, either Charles or Seb. Okay, I'll go with Charles just because maybe that's going to be a fun question for Seb. But Charles around Suzuka would be my ideal lap if Lewis isn't there.
So long as they're not on plan B for barrier, you should be all right. So, Denz, why don't you? While we're here, Denz, who would you pick and what track?
Man, that's a really great question. Well, I mean, I recently did like one of my kind of last to first challenges in the sim, so that was at Istanbul Park. So just. Again, another crazy circuit, that's got a lot of elevation changes, the very infamous turn 13. And actually, if we're going to talk about like drivers you'd probably want to experience that with, I'm going to actually say Seb, because obviously, I don't know if you guys remember that kind of funny incident he had with Mark Webber that time where both of them crashed out at turn 13. And like Mark Webber was absolutely fuming. And then Seb was just making like a kind of like look like a kind of like sign, like this guy is like a lunatic, like he tried to kill me, kind of like. So I think that would bring up some very interesting memories for Seb, and not also just that as well, even in recent memories. If we're talking about Charles Leclerc, I think Charles had a bit of a howler, I think, back in 2020 when he's trying to dive it down the inside of Sergio Perez on the penultimate corner, went completely off the circuit, and then Sebastian Vettel managed to pick up that final podium place. I just remember the image, of Lewis's eyes just watering over, like just with this relief and this happiness and this fulfillment, and Seb coming over to him as well and shaking his hand. And me and Black discussed it on this podcast too, that like Lewis and Seb, they've been a bit up and down. They've obviously done some karting together, some junior formulas together. Things got a bit hot between them in Baku many years ago, where Seb just completely lost his head. He thought that Lewis brake tested him, not sure how. But just like
Seb and Lewis have a podium every year since 2009, a podium together.
Ooh, so
Denny,
if you had to get your crystal ball out, you think it's gonna happen again before Seb retires?
I hope so. I'm praying it does. That would be amazing. I don't know. I don't see it happening anytime soon. But who knows? F1 is F1.
Yeah, it's true, Denny. And obviously the technical directives have been pushed as well regarding the flexi floor and a lot of things too. I know certain team principals have been trying to make out that it's not going to affect them, but as Toto always says, the stopwatch never lies. So we're going to see very soon when we go back in Spa and then the remaining of the season as well, just to see how much it kind of does affect certain teams. And maybe there are teams that have also incorporated this flexi floor that we're not even privy to or haven't really been in the limelight. So it could be really interesting. And before I take over from Blag, just who would you have picked for your hot lap circuit and driver?
I think I'm going to annoy everyone because can I cheat? I don't think you stipulated F1 driver, right? You just said driver.
I see what you're doing.
All right. Either. I don't know.
That is really
See, I do. See, you don't like. This is why, Denny, you took umbrage at Abu Dhabi. You don't like cheats, you know. Okay, fine. Which case?
Yeah.
Which case? You don't like Sergio Perez either, but that's another story. So,
Ooh,
Oh my
lot of
goodness.
mercy.
so who would I pick and what circuit? What circuit do I like? Current circuit. So I just want to feel the speed. So I think I'd go to Monza because I
Right.
just want to see that car doing like 220, 230 at top speed down the straight with like zero rear wing. And who would I pick? Well, if you're in Italy, you've only got one team, so that's Ferrari. Because I want to hear the crowd, the tifosi. And if I'm
Hopefully
living
not booing.
vicariously, yeah, hopefully not. But well, we'll see this year. And so you've gone for Leclerc. I'll go for Leclerc. We'll save Sainz for another one. We'll save. I'm not playing tactically.
Leclerc's a good driver, yeah. But I think corners with Leclerc are more fun than straights.
Leclerc's a good driver, but corner. Is that? Are you alluding to the fact that sometimes he goes straight on corners?
No, stop. I think we need to stop the Leclerc slander, yeah? We need to stop. But no, just the way he sets up his car, the way he likes his car, I absolutely love to see that. Because I know when I started watching, one of the few things was I directed myself straight to the drivers, which I found fun to look at. And I was like, I could probably decipher what the driving style of these people are. And so I started studying them. And then late last year or mid last year, I was like, Charles Leclerc is a really good driver. And I want to know how this man drives. And so I would load like lots of telemetry for that driver. Like every race, I would look at Charles' telemetry. How does he like his car? How does he take his corners? And how does he like the setup of the car and all of these things? And so I think corners with him would be something that I would definitely risk to go for.
Well, I feel like I'm going to be safer because there's a lot of, at the end of the front straight in Monza, you can just crash through the polystyrene and keep going. So I think I'll have the last laugh. But there we go. Okay, I'll hand back to Denz now. You can ask the next one. Go on, mate.
Like I was gonna say, you're gonna run a low downforce setup with Charles on the banked version of Monza.
No. This is the thing. I was gonna go IndyCar, and I was gonna go around Monza there, but you wouldn't let me. You didn't want me to cheat, so that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, man, the cheat. We already have an episode on cheating, man, and our boss Georgina was very vocal, on the ramifications that could potentially hold for certain people. A certain Mexican piñata, that may have sold his soul to the energy drinks company, but we don't speak about that on this podcast. So anyway, Denny, new question. The sad kind of thing, and we've seen it across in the world of tennis. Serena Williams is kind of like playing with all of our emotions. She's playing with my emotions, and like basically alluding to the fact that at some point she will inevitably have to retire. And I think the day that happens,
announced a retirement already.
That's the thing. Like she's saying it so cryptically, so I was like, maybe it's just me being in denial and just not wanting to accept it.
You're probably in denial.
I know. But
Hey, he's in denial in every second, every moment, in everything. Okay, Liam Lawson, I got your back, man.
Don't worry, Georgie. I got Liam Neeson, not Lawson, Neeson for you this time. Don't you worry. You could get taken. If you will get the reference there as well, I have made an absolute howler on one of the intro episodes with our great friend Bryson Sullivan. So if you haven't checked that episode out, please do. But yeah, don't worry. Liam Lawson and Liam Neeson will soon turn up to your ends, Georgie. They're waiting for you. But kind of bringing it back to the topic of the question, Denny. At the end of the day, we will have to say goodbye. There's always kind of a life after a life, I guess, or an afterlife, you could put it that way. And Lewis has been quite kind of like clever, with kind of, doing the stuff that he enjoys outside of the circuit as well, in terms of his music, in terms of his fashion. There even was talks about him potentially having a cameo role in a Tom Cruise film, which I thought would have been absolutely splendid, if I must say so myself. But one of the other kind of things we saw was before the kind of summer started, there were talks that maybe he was going to make an investment in Chelsea. Sadly, didn't happen as a Chelsea fan myself. But however, his interest and investment has been successful in relation to the Bronco NFL team. So just from your perspective as well, Denny, what are your thoughts, on Lewis kind of like setting up for life after like racing with all of these different investments, and what could you see him doing once he finally kind of like puts his helmet up and puts his feet up for a bit?
I think Lewis is creating the legacy outside of the sport. Like, he's a big personality, and he has. I know people don't like to see this, to say this and admit this, but he has outgrown Formula One, and I don't think there's anything besides obviously fast cars and the nice racetracks and fans. There's nothing Formula One can offer Lewis right now, unless you're obviously just going to continue to increase his salary every year. So I think it's great that he's expanding his businesses. I think it's great that he's expanding his investment. At some point, he's going to have kids, and his kids are going to live off something, and that money is going to come from these buildings he's making and these investments and teams and all that. That is always I think we need to understand that this is investment that is going to come back as financial help to maybe someone somewhere else. It's a fortune that he's building. So I think it's great. We need to admit that Lewis is getting old. He's the oldest there, besides like next to Fernando, right? He's the second oldest in the grid. And so at some point he's going to be tired. And he himself said he doesn't want to retire when he's completely burnt out. So I think by the time he's 40, 41, he's going to put his helmet down and he needs to roam around other things. And to have these many interests and doors open for him is so great. He could go be an actor in Top Gun. He could go release another collection with Tommy Hilfiger. He can go sit at Kanye's house and make music and drop an album. He can now go to the US and he has a house there and sit there and watch the Denver Broncos roam into maybe win a Super Bowl or something. I don't understand football like that. But I think he's amazing. I don't think he's a man of just doing one thing, even though he says he likes to just focus on one thing. I think he loves to be around and doing different things. He just never sits down and says, okay, let my brain do other things. Like, he has Mission 44, he has the Hamilton Commission, he has Ignite, he has Accelerate 25 with Mercedes. And I just think his future is bright and he has so much energy and he's going to continue to train. So by the time he's 50, he's going to be so young still, running around to Paris, New York, and all these things. And I can't wait to see what the future holds, because Team LH is going to ride with Lewis regardless. I feel like he's also going to document his journey regardless of being in F1 or not. There's always going to be media outlets talking about the projects he's making. There's always going to be teams reporting things. And it's exciting to see him like expand into other worlds, because F1 it's a bubble. He's burst out the bubble and now he's just reaching for the stars,
Absolutely, Denny. To be honest, I think he is already one of the stars, man. Like, he's just Lewis. Like, you just like, and the thing with him as well is like, no matter where he goes in the world, like, he always get recognized. People always like, know him for his achievements. And another thing I'll just kind of mention on that too is, like, where I'm just so impressed and so flattered with him is he has so many like commitments and so many responsibilities as well, like you mentioned, Denny, and like it doesn't seem to like stop him, or it doesn't seem to kind of like distract him in a way from driving the car on the limit and maximizing its performance. If anything, and I think that is what makes Lewis so unique from any other driver, is I think these causes, they fire him up even more. They like like actually, how do I even put it, man? Like, it's almost as if like it gives him a new lease of life and a new kind of purpose to race, which I think is amazing. And Blag, what are your kind of like takes on that too?
I'm incredibly impressed with all of the different causes that his charitable philanthropic ventures. On the investment in the Broncos side, I think we're I don't know, treating him differently because he's a black driver or a black figure. Like, it just shows he's got his money right. He's investing. He's smart. Like, we shouldn't underestimate that he's a smart guy. He's looking to invest in a profile franchise. Clearly, him or his financial advisor thought that this was a worthwhile venture. So yeah, from a kind of sporting perspective, it's interesting, crossing from one code to another. But in general, it just shows that, you know, he's got the people around him to make sure he's investing his money correctly. And you know, if you're earning, you know, what is it, 40 million US dollars or pounds or whatever a year solely on the salary plus any endorsements, you've got to, you know, you've got to invest that money in. Good job. So yeah, it's intriguing, but also, like, let's just not forget he's a shrewd guy. Clearly, he's just read up on investment and doing a good job too.
So true, Blag. You know, and yeah, it's a really exciting time, you know, as a Team LH kind of fan as well. Because I mean, you know, you got other drivers, for example, like Seb, for example, which, you know, has announced his retirement, and you can see that he'll probably have a lot of kind of things he'd like to do, a lot of initiatives to kind of push and stuff like that as well. But I just don't think it's the kind of same in terms of like Lewis, which has that kind of Hollywood kind of appeal and aspect. At the same time as well, like Blag mentioned, you know, all of these positive causes and things he does for the betterment of people that, you know, are less advantaged or don't get the same opportunities as well. So very, very key. And to kind of bring it back to the interactive question side of this podcast as well, Denny, this is the next one for you. So let's say not only is Sebastian Vettel stepping down from Aston Martin, but Toto Wolff as well, you know, like Susie's had a really great year in Formula E, smashed it up, Stoffel Van Dorn, the Formula E world champion. She's kind of said to Toto, Totes, I don't know if she refers to him as Totes, but anyway, I'm just going to say that. Totes, I just think, you know, like we need to spend more time with our boy Jack, you know, and just kind of like, you know, live behind the scenes a bit. And she's like, you know what? This person on Twitter, this FIA Girly, I think she'd be an amazing replacement team principal at Mercedes-AMG Petronas F1 Team. And the board agree. So you become the new team principal. And as the team principal, Denny, this is your first responsibility. You have to pick either somebody from Team LH or F1 Twitter. And these are the 3 roles you have to recruit on. You have to pick a new technical director. You have to find a podcast, excluding Stripping the Dipping, of course, because I think Georgie's already taken by Liam Neeson. Pun there. And you have to also find a mentor that's gonna basically, you know, be around for Lewis and George, you know, to help them out, you know, and to just kind of like cheer them up once in a blue moon as well. So you got to recruit a technical director, a podcast to do the social media stuff, and then like a personal assistant for both drivers. Who are you picking from the F1 Twitter world / Team LH community?
Okay, I know the podcast. I'm gonna go for Quick Stop F1. I think it's so important to have Black creators in the environment, to have safe spaces. Like I said in the beginning, the way we deliver things, the way we approach certain conversations, you can't just have your counterparts do that. It has to be from Black people. So I think Quick Stop F1 would be my go-to. I think Nyasha and Tandy are absolutely amazing. Mentor, what would mentor entail? What are they doing? Is it like stuff in the head?
Kind of
like psychology.
Kind of imagine like Angela Cullen, kind of yeah, just kind of, you know, this there to kind of help out and just to kind of like, let's say, you know, if that meanie Christian Horner's been a bit of a twat and said something really mean, you know, just to kind of lift Lewis's spirits a bit.
I think mental. I'd have to go. I don't know. I think you guys know my friend Athena. She is absolutely yeah, no, she's amazing with words. I know she's been my mentor for plenty of times. So I think she is the go-to when you need like a little cheer and a little put into perspective. Her brain is amazing. Her mind, the way she thinks about things and the way she expresses them as well, is absolutely stunning. So I think she would be the mentor for the 2 drivers. She put them in the right headspace, I think, because she puts me in the right headspace. And as if Tim Principal is okay, I think drivers would be okay. And technical director, this one's hard because I know a lot of tech people, and I'm super proud to be in this environment where tech is the influential part of F1 for me. It's not just like the stand side of things, but Team LH, tech. I think the 2 people I want them to be out there. I think the most obvious thing right now, just because I can't just pinpoint other people, I'd have to say Bryson.
Good choice. Good choice.
Yeah, I think that's the most obvious thing, because that's like the one of the biggest tech names for Team LH specifically. So I think he would be like the yeah, it would probably be him. Probably Bryson, the technical director.
See, Denny, this is why they need to make you the new team principal, man. Like the rationale as well was so like poised and like well explained. And and also whilst we're on the topic of it as well, big shout out, to Quick Stop F1. Obviously Tandy and Yasha as well doing their thing and just being, I almost say fearless in just the way that they tackle some very tricky kind of topics and make it in a way that's like digestible and actually relatable for people to understand. It's such a huge skill that people underestimate. So huge shout out to Quick Stop. Obviously Athena as well. She's one of the home girls too. Tarmac Talk. Make sure you guys obviously go and follow her as well. She's amazing. And then Mr. Bryson Sullivan, man. He's just that guy is like literally our Adrian Newey. Like people need to actually deep that in. Like, Bryson's this understanding and comprehensive knowledge of this, it's so technically advanced. Some of these topics we talk about, like, wake or kind of like, turbulence or kind of dirty air and these kind of topics as well. And this is his ability to kind of break it down to the average Joe like me, and just the way he does it as well is so engaging. So huge shout out to those people. And then Black, who would you pick? So let's say you are going to be like the principal of the Mercedes F1 team. Who would you pick in those three kind of roles?
Yeah, I'm because so let's say that the social media role's full, the technical director's full. I'm sporting director has to be filmer because that guy in the steward's room never going to stop. He's like the the evil Wario and then the good Mario. He's like the Mario of the Jonathan Wheatley kind of in the mirror. So I think the guy for the sporting director as we're building this team out. And then, I'm trying to think like in charge of pit stops. Like I'm trying to create a really calm, friendly, non-judgmental environment. And I know that Thanos doesn't really criticize Mercedes pit stops. So I'm gonna bring Thanos in and I'm gonna put him in charge like chief mechanic because I feel like that's the sort of safe space we want to create for our our pit team. So those that's who I'd pick as my people in the team. What about you, Denz? Who else are we bringing in? Who else do we need? We need head of logistics. Who are we bringing?
Oh man, now you put me on the spot, man. Well, firstly, I was going to compliment the kind of choices you made. I mean, Filmer, aka Jay, this is amazing, man, and I just love the way he rattles people as well. And I pray, I literally pray that it continues, just because that guy is his banter is just like comedy gold. Like he's the best. So big shout out to Jay / Filmer, and obviously Uncle Thanos. Uncle Thanos. Like you said it perfectly as well, Black. I think in terms of Mercedes, like literally ride or die. Like you'll never see him like put down Mercedes. Like he's not going to be one of those people that like hide behind the bushes or kind of like says things to make people feel nice. He's very honest, but at the same time as well, that loyalty and just that commitment to perfection I definitely get from Thanos. And at the same time too, man, Uncle Thanos can cuss. I heard him telling somebody to go suck the mother the other day and it was sweet. So yeah, can't lie. Uncle Thanos is a great person to have in the team as well because he gives no Fs, and I just love it as well. You need somebody with a thick skin that can, like give it as well as taking it as well, man. So big shout out to Thanos too. And then logistics, man. Well, can we elaborate on that further, like in terms of like logistics in terms of the team, the equipment, the drivers?
This guy's got to get, or person's got to get the team from Silverstone all the way over to Monza, all the way over to Kota. They're responsible for getting everyone from A to B. I don't know who we could pick. You can have any role in the team you want.
Well, I think I know the perfect guy for that, man. His name's Brad Philpott, another legend to the channel as well. Again, super reliable, knows how to drive a car on a 6-pence coin. He's got very good tire management skills as well. So, how we live in a cost cap generation, like the tires probably last, like for years. So that's always a shout out to. And this again, really, really this good person, always willing to answer good questions, always, like very kind of like positive minded and progressive too. big shout out to Brad, man. I definitely think I'd have him as the head of logistics too.